afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. It is almost Friday. It's sunny and warm, and I appreciate everyone being here for our Thursday Lunch and Learn. We are super excited to have Jill from Harrisonburg City Public Schools today. Jill is one of the most amazing advocates for inclusion, and it's my pleasure to have her here today. And I'm sorry that in Oregon it's cloudy, but it's beautiful in Virginia. And we're going to be really talking about some really creative strategies for inclusion, which is one of my favorite topics too. So please remember that you can put your questions in the chat box, and towards the end, we will be addressing those questions. And as part of our Lunch and Learns, we record them and post the recordings in our archives along with the PowerPoint presentation. So by being part of that today, you are consenting to being recorded, but we would get rid of all identifying information. So no worries there. All right, Jill, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thanks for asking me to be here, Stacy. Wow, this is a big topic, and I've been working in the field of education for over 40 years now, and it's an interesting time for me right now because I only have a few weeks before I actually retire. I have, I guess, gotten to that point where I feel like the timing is right. I told Stacy I've been what I do now is I'm a coach, and I travel between schools, and I've been doing that for 5 years. Prior to that, I was in a classroom for a good number of years with students with autism, and then almost the rest of my career was spent in resource rooms and self-contained rooms, mostly working with students with disabilities. So you know, just even driving between schools this morning, I ended up still like having ideas of things I wanted to share. And it was just, so it's one of my passions. And because I've been in this a long time, I think back to those days truly when the special education classrooms were in that building, you know, across the field or in the back of the school. And so I feel like we've come a long way in many respects, but we still have a long way to go. So I've been doing a lot of reading, have found a lot of really interesting resources on inclusion. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on. I've been working with an inclusion grant I received, mostly focused at one school in particular. So I've been reading a lot of books on the subject. And I actually don't have the slide I realized included, but I will, before it is posted, I'll add a slide at the end, which will have the resources that I've used. So I came across this phrase of cultivating inclusion, and I thought, I love that. I love that word. It just seems perfect when we're talking about this topic, because inclusion doesn't happen overnight. It isn't a program. It's not about fitting in. It's not a favor that we do for someone. So just like cultivating a garden, it takes a lot of care. So we need to cultivate what we hope and what we expect to grow and progress. And we need to be diligent about it, and diligent about providing the care that is needed to bring that progress and that growth to the light and for it to continue to be nourished. So it takes planning, it takes collaboration, it takes commitment and training and a shared vision and a belief in it and a value of it. And it's just a mindset. And so again, it's something that doesn't just happen. A lot needs to be put into place for it to actually work and to be accepted. So just to start, I just want you to think about what inclusion means to you. And if you'll just put, a quick response in the chat, and I'll try and do this a couple times during the presentation. I don't want to do all the talking. There are a lot of voices here. And then Stacy will help me.
I can read them off to you.
Okay, great.
Collaborating with all stakeholders, building community, connection and community, building partnerships and community, understanding, students with a variety of ability levels working together and collaborating to foster community and belonging, shared learning and experiences. Oh, I love these. Everyone is equitably included, building community and understanding, meaningfully engaged.
That's great. Those are all amazing ideas. Thank you for sharing those. In my reading, I found this organizer, and I really like it because it shows us, like somebody had mentioned, I mean, there are many stakeholders, right? And so one of the resources I found, it's by Paula Kluth. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she has a lot of experience with autism, has a great writing style. And I really like all of the resources that she has put together. But one resource that I read recently, it was called "Aren't We Already Doing Inclusion?" And it's a very small book, actually, and it's divided into 4 sections. And it's divided into classroom, school, division, and community. And I really like that. So that's really the way I set this up today, to follow that. And just the idea that it is a collective endeavor, right? It needs to be that mindset at all levels. So, you know, what can I do? I feel like that was something I was always doing and tried to help those that I work with now, you know, figuring out what can I do with my classroom and my program, and how do I develop and nurture a home and school relationship and connection as well, because we know that that is so important. And I think, even though I'm going to start with the classroom, and actually I think that's the way the book was set up, that we have to remember that true and lasting change takes place when the buy-in and the expectations are coming from the top, right? And the vision for the school, it's a vision for the school division as a whole. So really looking at, so will the impact be in a number of schools, or are we expecting it to be in all schools? And will the impact be in a number of classrooms, or are we expecting it to be in all classrooms? And I think that's really important. So as we look at the stakeholders of classroom, school, home, and the district, or I'm sorry, classroom, school, district, and community is the way I have it set up. I'm starting with like a guiding quote, and then I'll have some questions and considerations, and then I'll be sharing like some personal experiences or things that I've come across that I just think are those kind of fun to try or worth a try. So Stacy, thank you for continuing to monitor the chat, and I'm going to pause at the end of each of the sections, and I'd love for you to be able to share some of your experiences as we go through these sections. So I'm going to start with classroom and a couple quotes. So I really love these quotes, and it's not like I've known them for a long time. I've just come across them. But this first one, something very magical happens in those classrooms where skilled and caring adults who celebrate diversity are committed to truly inclusive teaching and learning. And it shouldn't be magical. It should just be reality, right? But when you do walk into a classroom and you see all of the pieces coming together, which means that no one stands out, but everybody is a community, then that is magical. And you see students helping students. If there's more than one teacher in the classroom, the students are looking to both of those teachers or other adults as there to support everyone. So I do think it is magical. I think it's important too, the word skilled, because again, it doesn't happen overnight. We have, I think, a lot of the qualities that are important, but we really need to have training in order to know how to implement all of those ideas and strategies. Obviously, we need adults that care. Celebrating diversity is a key, another passion of mine, and committed. And then I love the word truly, because just like with collaboration, I feel like we can go through the motions of it, but if we're not really truly invested in it, and if it isn't really our belief and our mindset, it falls short. So, just that word truly, I think, is super important. And I think too that, we need to really be interested in how does each student learn, and what does each of the students in that classroom value, and what can I learn from each of the students? And I think this is a really important question too, is what prevents me from or helps me to see that student's competence? So just some guiding questions and thoughts with that. Another quote I really love is this one: inclusive classrooms support the abilities and recognize the possibilities of all students. So I love this because it's taking the dis out of disabilities, right? We're focusing on abilities. We're presuming competence. And if we're presuming competence, then our students are going to feel confident. They're going to believe that they have the abilities and that they can reach their goals, and that the possibilities are really endless. So I like this because again, it's positive and there isn't anything can't about it. Okay, so when we look at an inclusive classroom, there are just some effective practices to kind of keep in mind. So we have individual services and supports. And so I think along with that, something that's really important, of course, is always reaching out to our families and learning about our students through their families' eyes and their experiences. And I think something that I've really learned through the years is, really finding out what our students' interests are and what their learning styles are and their learning preferences, and just really building on those, because if we do that, we're going to see increased engagement in our social interactions, but also in academic activities. And I was thinking a lot of students I've worked with through the years, and I was like, I don't know where I can put this in, but just saying that now, I think back to many years ago. There are probably some of you on here that are pretty young and may not remember this time, but the time when Michael Jackson was really big. I had some students, I worked in a classroom down in Orlando, Florida, and it was predominantly an African-American school neighborhood area. And I loved the culture of the school, and I learned so much from my students. And this was a time where they just embraced the music of Michael Jackson. So I had one student in particular that would moonwalk in and out of the classroom. I had another one that was a gifted artist. And so I had a full-size Michael Jackson on my bulletin board with a glitter glove and everything. And it was just recognizing again his talents, their talents, and allowing it to become a part of our classroom and our day-to-day activities. Visuals are super important, as we all know. I'm a visual learner, so I really need visuals along with the verbals. And so I think that's probably most important, really focusing on students' preferences and their learning styles. As far as systematic instruction, we know, we're going to assess, we're going to set our goals, decide methods, carry out our procedures, and always have data to support whatever we're doing. Comprehensible, structured learning environments. This is super important, and I've really seen that through the years. That's one thing I really learned, I think the focus might have started with, oh, let's just create this really pretty classroom, putting up a lot of different things that I thought my students would like, but not maybe paying attention to how the room was really set up. So looking at, visual schedules and just visuals that are meaningful, not so much the things that just look pretty, but they really have a purpose. Clearly defined spaces. There's, I have a picture up there where the spaces you could see are clearly defined. There are work tubs there. I would expect there are work folders, timers, visual timers, task lists, because the idea when the environment is structured and when it is understood by students, they are more apt to become responsible and more independent, because when we end up doing things for individuals that can really do those things for themselves, then we're really disabling them in a sense. So just really, I love watching students. I've had the experience this year of students that have, it's so different, even with the environment, even with this crazy world we've had for this past year. Students that were virtual and then came into the classroom in person, and to see how they went from, I don't even know how to describe it. We're being very dependent on adults, being very dependent for directions, what the next step was. And now being in a classroom that is very structured and the expectations are very clear and consistently reinforced. These students are totally different students in a very short time. They are able to follow directions. They are able to get their materials out. They're able to complete tasks independently, return materials to the places they need to be, get to different places in the school. It's been amazing. And so for me, just this one classroom I have in my mind has made an incredible difference with a group of students as a whole. Specific curriculum content. So we want to focus on the areas that our students with autism typically have difficulties with. So, social skills, communication skills, play and leisure, how to hold conversations, self-help. We want to have a functional approach to problem behavior. So, our ABC charts, what is our behavior? What was the antecedent? What happened right before that behavior? And then what follows the behavior as far as a consequence. And then the last, which I had already said, family involvement is across the board as an effective practice, a must do. And once you establish those relationships, I'm sure you all know that, once you establish those relationships, so much positive happens because of it, because you're working together as a team. So what does an inclusive classroom look like? So if we were to walk into what would be considered an inclusive classroom, these are some things we might be able to see, or we would hope to see. That all students are engaged in meaningful work that's supporting their instructional goals, and that meaningful is a key word, that the work is challenging, it's not just work to fill the time, that there's structured activities alternating with more unstructured activities, and throughout that there's choice. So much of this is, this isn't anything new. Learner objectives and activities and rules positively stated and clearly posted. Lots of different strategies and materials and technology and groupings so that we're meeting everybody's needs. And I think this next one is really important, that our services, our related services, our special education services and related services are actually being brought into the general, education classroom, and the staff is working together with those students. I love when I walk into a room and our occupational therapist or physical therapist or speech language pathologist is working side by side with a para or with a teacher in serving a student or several students, because it's happening more naturally. It's in that student's classroom with his or her peers, and it's just a greater benefit than, pulling out, although at times we do need to do pull out, but as much as possible, bringing those services to gen ed. It's really important when you walk into an inclusive classroom that students aren't labeled. They aren't, you can't pick them out because of the adult support. You see adult support happening, throughout the room, and not sitting side by side with a student, because that's our way that our students end up becoming independent and more responsible and look towards their peers to also make gains. And that student to student interactions are happening in whatever way, whether it's partners or whether it's small groups, that students are working together to support each other, answer each other's questions, and kind of, be the protectors of each other from bullying or peer pressure. Assignments are purposeful, maintain rigor, students are making measurable progress, and the classroom arrangement supports positive behavior and learning, which we talked about just with that structured, easily understood classroom layout. We want students to be able to access the materials that they need, and then also be able to make the transitions that they need to make within the classroom. I think this key question is really interesting, and this is something that I feel like it's been a question that I've had when I was a case manager and teacher going into classrooms, whether to observe, to co-teach, or support students. And I still do this when I go into classrooms because it's really important, and I think the answer changes. I think the answer depends on what classroom I'm in. And again, it's the whole mindset, I think, and the idea of providing opportunities for all students. So the question, how often do our students in particular have an opportunity to participate, I say meaningfully and successfully, in class or group activities by communicating, whether that's verbal or whether it's communication system, whether it's gestures, whatever. So being able to communicate, share their ideas, and interact with each other. And so we might have opportunities, but then the next question is, are they meaningful opportunities? And then what's the preparation? Because I think of students I've taught through the years, and I remember one student in particular, his mom had shared, right, like with our first meeting, that her child took 40 seconds of wait time to be able to respond to a question. And if you repeated the question or moved on too fast, then he would lose everything that he had processed to that point, and you would have to start again. So, I think the wait time, preparation, how are we how are we preparing our students that we're going to ask them a question, we're going to ask them to participate in a particular way? What are the tasks that our students enjoy and how can we incorporate them in class so that we ensure that they are participating? And what roles will they play? I read something about, if a student has a device, a communication device, it's a great opportunity for that child to be able to show his or her peers about the device and how it works and how it helps. And that has actually happened. I have not seen it, but heard about it in this one classroom where the students are intrigued by the student's communication device. And once they learned about it, it's just they want to keep learning about it. And it's just the way this particular student communicates and it's accepted. So it's a great opportunity to teach about things that we don't know that help others be successful. Okay, this is something I don't know that's always thought of, or I don't know that I've thought about it as carefully as maybe I should have. And this may not even be all of the areas, but just as a, a thinking point, like when we work towards inclusion too, we also have to think about, again, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like, okay, we're doing inclusion starting tomorrow. We have to really work at what do our students need to have to be ready to be successful in these inclusive settings. And what do we need to continue to teach and to help support. So like school and classroom routines, there's this example here where this teacher is like, smile at your teacher. So there's that social interaction. This is what I want you to do when you walk into my classroom. I want you to smile at me, right? Give your notes to your teacher, or, make your lunch choice, hang up your book bag. There's so many things that go on that I think we just take for granted. We naturally do them, or we look to others to see what we're supposed to be doing, and we do them. So intentionally teaching about these transitions, bathroom, is there a bathroom in the classroom? Do you need to use the bathroom and check out? I was in a classroom the other day where students could get up when they needed to and leave the room, but they wrote their name on the board before they left. What are the routines of lining up? What are the expectations? For group instruction, when I sit in a group, what kind of group is it? Is it a whole group? Is it a small group? How am I supposed to be sitting? What does it look like to be attending? I think of course, this would have been when I was being observed one time, not just any day. I asked my students, there was a lot of activity going on in my room, lots of stations and stuff going on. So I had asked a few students to join me on the carpet and that I was going to be sharing a book with them. So I sat on the carpet and I had two students with me, and they sat down and they were, very excited about this. And I asked them to sit up a little bit straighter. And so they shifted in their seats and, they were ready. They were ready for this story. However, they were looking in the opposite direction. They were not looking in the direction of the book or myself. So what does it look like to attend? And what does my teacher expect when I need to respond? Or when she asks me to work with a partner, what does that mean? Self-care, we know all those, washing the hands and blowing your nose and putting on your jacket to go out for recess, those kinds of things. And then social skills, so many skills. But again, like even personal space, greetings, how do we play games? How do we win? How do we lose? I mean, we could go on and on and on and list all of the skills, right, that are involved in getting ready and being a member of a classroom community. So really thinking through what strategies are most effective, and what adaptations or modifications need to be considered. And again, we can't really expect for all of this to necessarily be in place before we begin, but just being aware of that our students may not know how to do these things and may need to be taught very explicitly how to do each of these tasks. Okay, I have, let's see, 2 more slides, then we're going to do a little break and I want some input. So here are some ideas to consider. And I really like these, and some of the, just some of the ways they were presented came from a couple of these different resources, but ideas to consider. And so for all classrooms, right, make every room a sensory room. Just having different seating options, having headphones if students need them, a sound machine, different lighting options. I know a lot of classrooms have different light lamps they bring in because those overhead fluorescent lights are, you know, just really hard on the eyes sometimes. You know, having spaces with, I don't know if we can still do like soft pillows and all of that, but like mindfulness exercises, you know, having those calm places that I can go in a classroom. I saw this idea, having an SOS kit, so support our students, and just having this kit where a student has what they need to be successful and complete tasks. Maybe it's a dry erase board or a visual timer, fidgets, whatever. And they had cookbook stand, and the only thing I could think of with that is maybe if I would think of a student, maybe if they were taking notes where they might have a textbook that they would put up in the cookbook stand, and then they would be able to take notes and just give their, have a little bit extra space at their desk. I like the idea of the elastic structures, and elastic structures, the way I interpret that to be, is they're structures that help us to grow and help us to stretch in our learning. So there are some ideas for that. Movement throughout the day and collaborating with service providers. I know our occupational therapists especially are glad to collaborate and introduce movement, as well as our PE instructors. And this, when I think of inclusion, I thought about this just on my drive this morning. One of my students who's actually getting ready to graduate this year, but when she was my student back in elementary school in 4th grade, I was trying to prepare her classroom teacher for just different, you know, nice to knows about this student. It would be helpful for you to know this, you know, about some sensory things and all of that. Well, I'd neglected to talk about a few of the things. And so I was in there one day, and this student was in the back of the room and was just galloping back and forth, back and forth. And I called the teacher over and I said, oh, I forgot to tell you that the student really likes to gallop. And he said, yeah, I've been noticing that. And he said, it probably would be good for all of us to just get up and gallop sometimes too. So I was like, oh my gosh, you're embracing this. It isn't anything unusual. It's just what that student needs. And because of his mindset, the other students in the class might look at her, but then they would just go on because they know that that's what she needed. The student also benefited from having crunchy things like apples or carrots or pretzel sticks. And that was one of our occupational therapists' ideas as far as it helped her to focus. So we might have real sticky hands and apple juice dripping, but we were engaged. We were engaged with our peers. We were moving around the classroom as we needed to, just because we had that movement. And then we also had that, that sensory type of snack with something hard and crunchy. Another idea was making it mutual and having learning buddies. So we're choosing a student that is a really good role model and would be very helpful, along with a student that will learn from that student. However, the thing that I like about this is it's not just putting that student that we're choosing, for lack of a better way to say it right now, that student without an IEP. We're not taking that student and having them be in charge, you know, and being a mentor necessarily, but they are mutual partners. And so part of this partnership is that they are responsible for checking in with each other, asking how each other is. Do you need help? Do you understand? So the important thing about this is that both partners have a chance to give and receive feedback. So I love that. And I feel like you really have to know your students to be able to match them up well. And then choices for all, choices for all seating. I work in a school right now that has so many options for seating. It's amazing. And being in that setting really makes it clear how important it is and how many students don't sit in one type of seat all day long. They stand, they might be at a standing desk, they might be on a stool that's rocking, they might have different heights for the stools. They might have a chair that kind of rocks a little bit. It's really amazing to see, and really, really helpful to the students, depending on what task they're involved in. Choices for how to respond. Are students able to write or type or draw or say their answers? Or if they're solving problems for math, can they use a calculator? Can they show their learning with manipulatives? Or do they do mental math? A lot of time I had one student that his math teacher that he had one year was adamant about showing your work. You had to show all your work. And this student could do all of this work in his head. And he couldn't always explain or show how he was thinking through these problems. Plus, writing wasn't a favorite activity, and it also wasn't an easy thing for him to do. So for him, it was much less stressful for him to just be able to say, I'm doing mental math. And the last part before we share a little bit more together is building classroom communities. So one-pagers with determined project, strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. A school that I'm working with right now on an inclusion grant, this is incredible. The theme of the inclusion, they have an inclusion committee. They're a school that has just had some resource classrooms, and they now have 2 classrooms of students with autism. It is the perfect time to be embracing inclusion because they are learning. They are learning this and embracing this, and are so motivated from the beginning. And so what we are doing as part of the grant is every child and adult in the school has completed a one-pager. And the idea is to debunk normal, what is normal, and embrace the uniqueness and the value of everybody. So one-pagers I've been able to help out and support in a 1st grade dual language class, a 2nd grade classroom, and a 3rd grade virtual classroom during this. And it's just been amazing to see the way everyone in that school has embraced the possibilities of learning more about our students. These next ideas are from a resource, which I will be adding to the PowerPoint, and it's called Joyful Learning. And we're using it as a book study also at this school, and it's by Paula Kluth. It is amazing because it has all of these great ideas that are divided up in different sections. These are the ones that I've listed here are beginning of the year activities. And they just, for each one, they talk about different ways to engage students, different options for younger students, middle school, high school. There are areas in the book after each of the ideas on reflecting. First of all, planning, how might I use this in my classroom? And then reflecting on how did it go? What might I do next? But so this group resume, I think that's what it was called. I love that idea as a follow-up to a one-pager, because what it is, it's looking after we know each individual's strengths and preferences and all of this, especially strengths. We make a group resume as a classroom. So individually, these are our talents and our strengths, but now collectively as a classroom, what are our talents as a classroom? And when you see those kinds of lists, it's pretty impressive. Pass a compliment is just that, different formats for complimenting, teaching students how to compliment each other. And so there's lots of great ideas with that. We all own the problem is collective problem solving. If there's bullying, if, oh, I don't know, you know, an issue with somebody being left out, or, you know, there's anxiety about a particular a test coming up or whatever. How do we solve this problem together? Putting all heads together. One step ahead is a nonverbal activity where you're just like standing on a line and you're saying statements about different attitudes or ideas, and you take a step ahead, you know, if it is about you. So you're able to see those students or your peers that have similar ideas and attitudes, but also those that are different, that we need to hear their voice. And again, just knowing our similarities and then the ways that we're different and unique. And then that's what It's a Small World is. So it's kind of, there are different structures where students find one student, they partner up with them, they list things, they find ways that they're the same. Maybe they each have a brother, maybe they have a pet. Then they go off and they find somebody else and they decide, you know, do you also have a pet, or do you? And so it kind of, it ripples out. So it starts with a partner and then it goes out to other partners, and then it's pretty much class-wide. So I thought those were really, I have not done a lot of those, but they're so easy to do. And I think they lend themselves to being really beneficial at any point during the year, but I think especially at the beginning of the year. These kinds of things are working in this particular school and in these classrooms at this time, because these students, many of the students have just started back. So their first day of, you know, in-person learning, they're just learning, many of them, it may be a new school for them. It's certainly meeting their teacher in person for the first time, being in their classroom for the first time. So it's a great way to build communities. I thought like it would, just as a quick kind of thing to do this, well, I don't know if we have time to do that actually. What is the time?
We have about 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness, so we don't have time. What I really want to do is, what I wanted to do was for us to do a group resume together. But what I'd like you to do is, if you have any ideas that you want to just put in the chat real quick too, about, is there something that you can add to something that's been successful, or something like, hey, this idea that you just shared makes me think of something I have done or something I'd like to try.
Jill, just as a side note, I love all these ideas and have been part of some of them in the past, and they are extremely meaningful. But a couple slides ago, you talked about like the whole mental math and not showing your work and being inclusive of that. I feel like sometimes we get very rigid about this is how things have to be done, that we don't take the time to say, hey, how about we are flexible, and if we all get to the same common goal, then it's okay, you know? So
exactly.
I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, and I just, you know, with many of these things I'm saying, I might be thinking of several students, but oftentimes it's one student. It's that one student that for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, they haven't been able to fit in. just because of, I'm glad that you brought that up, Stacy, the lack of flexibility, you know, and there is not one way to do anything, you know, and just even like saying these things and, you know, I'm thinking of so many more things, you know, because one thing leads to another, and then you start thinking about each individual student that you're working with or you know. And I am looking back even, I'm lucky that I get to still work with some of the students I worked with in elementary school, and I'm still able to connect with them in middle and high school. And I love that, and to be able to see their growth. But it's just like, I have to say, there are times that I think, oh, if I had only done whatever back then, or if I had been able to, you know, maybe not completely change a mindset, but help mold a mindset, or, you know, it's kind of one of those things you'll learn a lot along. And but yeah, that just that whole math thing, I think that really stands out to me because I'm not a math person. So give me those manipulatives and give me the calculator. I am not going to be doing the mental math.
So a few people have said they really like the book study idea, and that they've added the Paula Kluge book to their resources. Lisa said, providing student choice, students' ability to show their understanding of a skill or objective in a variety of ways. That's extremely important.
Yeah, and that book is amazing. And the book study, because it's been, again, that kind of a year, right? So we're just starting a little bit, but with it, but the goal is that, and actually the book has been provided for this inclusion committee. I was going to call them an inclusion committee, which this is another thing that's amazing at this school, that some people that wanted to be a part of this committee had to be turned down because the committee was getting to be too big. So there is like a representative from like grade levels and other areas on this committee so that these books can be shared. But I love, like, it's one resource that I am just really excited about, and just the potential with it, because it just helps you reflect so much. So I highly recommend that one. Okay, moving ahead, right? I could talk for hours, obviously. Okay, so for school, oh, it doesn't show my picture. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I just really like this. I'm just going to kind of highlight a couple things, okay? So we can, but honestly, if I have to say, like, you know, I'm probably going to relate more to, you know, classroom and school. But so critical, like for the school, critical points are to have committed leadership, right? Committed leadership. And if administrators value inclusion and inclusive ideals, then staff is more likely. If that expectation is there, inclusive practices need to be non-negotiable, right? They're not your students, they're not my students, they're our students together. And we have to have shared ownership, we have to have shared responsibility. But with that comes, this is where we need administration, and we need it at the schools, but we also need it at the division level to have that mindset that, especially at elementary school, that there is the time to collaborate between gen ed and special ed, including related services. And I had a couple of years where that just worked out beautifully, and I don't really know how that did. I've tried to think back on it, but we would meet on a regular basis and we would be talking about students, gen ed and the whole SPED team. And it just, those were amazing years because of it. I think they were the best years because of the teaming and all the voices at the table. I worked 1 year with fourth grade team that we all ate lunch together. The ESL teacher, related service providers, we had gen ed, we had SPED, we had everybody together. And I think that said something too, because we really were a close team. inclusive opportunities throughout the school, like opportunities to perform in plays and talent shows and clubs and sports, and just each student being recognized and valued as unique, exceptional, capable, and important. I can say so much about this. And it's so important for everybody that's working with a student to really understand that IEP, the accommodations, if there are behavior plans. And I've worked in like really amazing schools, like right now I am, but I also worked in a school where the minds, and this was a good number of years ago. This was like about 30 years ago. And I was in a hallway, a back hallway of a school, which is interesting because it was myself and it was a preschool class for students with disabilities. But then, and there was another special education class, and there were 2 kindergarten classes. And the teacher next to me was a kindergarten teacher. And so we were practicing inclusive practices way back then, when she actually invited my students. It was a self-contained self-contained classroom for students with intellectual disabilities. She invited my class to join her class at recess. Amazing, wonderful. Kids love doing this together. The administrator at that building, however, did not like that and told us that we could not be on the playground at the same time. Shocking as that is. But I've also had those experiences where accommodations were not accepted, encouraged, sabotaged, but just really interesting to see the mindset and what committed leadership, the influence it has on a building, although we found our ways to make it work. I've done the inclusion grant I'm doing this year, and I also did an inclusion grant at 2 other elementary schools a couple of years ago. Both did it very differently. One school, we did a lot of focus on simulation type activities, learning about disabilities of students that were present within the school. The highlight of that was a little 3rd grader who's blind, and she led the sessions through the day on blindness, and she taught about her cane. She taught how she read Braille. It was incredible, and she didn't do it alone. She did it with one of her gen ed peers who rotated through the day, and it was absolutely beautiful. And they actually presented to the school board together. So inclusion at its best. So building a school community, here are just a couple of ideas. Mix it up at lunch. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but just mixing it up. And so classrooms are mixed up with other classrooms. We're not segregating anybody, you know, and it's a great way. When we did it at one school, I had like table tents on the table with just had pictures or phrases or topics to talk about. And that was a big hit. We had fun kind of music about friendship playing, upbeat music, and it was a great event, which I wish would happen on a more regular basis. I love this idea that I read about, and this is so true. And that little picture down there with everybody wearing a different color kind of makes the point of what we would say would be desegregating staff during professional development, faculty meetings, etc. I've been guilty of it too, where you sit with your group. If you're a 3rd grade teacher, you sit with the 3rd grade team. If you're a special ed teacher, you sit with the special ed team. So we really need, if we're going to build an inclusive school community, we really need to have staff, you know, mixing it up. Celebrating everyone's whale, that is Paula Kluth's idea. That means celebrating everybody's not obsession, but more what is their fascination, right? What are they really interested in? I love that. It isn't, you know, it's something we're all fascinated with something. We all embrace something. So celebrating it, learn about it, you know. sure makes learning a lot more fun. And I like this. I thought this was an interesting idea. Check the doors. Does everyone enter the same doors at school? Or do the special ed buses enter through a different door? So just kind of a thought I thought was interesting. Okay. All right, heading into the home stretch. We're going to skip over this so I could just say this real quick, but you'll also have access to this PowerPoint. You know, I really like this quote about division-wide, you know, that we really have to create a better world for everyone. We're not like, we're not trying to fit people into what we have. We need to create things where everybody feels welcome and everybody belongs. And we're not looking at places or numbers or what somebody's label is, but we're looking at a student's needs. Who are they? Who are they? They're not a number, they're a person, they have a name. And what are the services that they need to be successful? I'm not going to go through all these, but these are some questions that are really good food for thought. I know like the first one, we are really focusing on a lot in Harrisonburg about getting our students, because we have 5 classrooms at the elementary level for students with autism. And they were, all of our classrooms were all at one school. And so now 2 of them are at a different school, but now we're looking at are our students attending their home school? If we are really trying to create inclusive communities, then we need to have our students in their home schools so that they are with their neighborhood peers and so on. And parents are, you know, families are together. Going just down to the goal is building high quality, collaborative, engaging and ultimately effective schools, which I love this part, which have enviable school cultures. You want other people to look at them and go, that's what I want. That's what it needs to be. And creative instruction for those students that just don't fit the mold. They don't fit into our structures right now. All right, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm just moving ahead to community. This is, I just think, a really important thing to think about is a community that excludes even one of its members is not a community at all. So really looking at, and there are some questions here about looking at those members in our community and how do we support them in different settings with different experiences and events that we do. And I just want to say that, and this is the end, I want to say in Harrisonburg, I've done a couple of more grants. I had one where I worked with some high school students on resume writing. They had varying disabilities, on resume writing and interviewing skills. And then I partnered with a businesswoman in our community who had a co-working space at the time. She has multiple businesses, very successful, lots of connections. And we held an event to culminate the interviewing practice and the resume writing. And we paired up each of the students with a business owner, a community member that matched the student's interest. And so we had, I don't know, Jack Brown's Burgers is really big in our area. The owner, we had a meteorologist, we had somebody that worked with our transportation system, we had a singer, we had a graphic organizer, we had a realtor, we had shop owners, and they were all a part of this event, interviewing these students and getting to know them and having a completely different outlook and understanding because of that experience. So I just say, you know, let's try and create more of those things where we are educating our community on how we are a community if we all work together and have the same vision. There's lots of work to be done. So maybe as I retire, I might, you know, work on some of those businesses. I really want like a food truck run by individuals with autism or whatever. And, you know, yeah, so I think that's my next goal.
Jill, this has been absolutely amazing and gives us such great food for thought. And, you know, as we do work across the state, or the Commonwealth, excuse me, I think about how important your messages are for all schools and all divisions, and what a value you just gave to us. And this has been absolutely wonderful, like many people have said. And, you know, I can't wait to see what your next endeavor is. And if it's a food truck, I'm in.
Okay. All right. I'm going to be recruiting people. I just want
Awesome.
to look up this book. This is the Joyful Learning one. So I'll have the information in the PowerPoint too, but.
Thank you everyone for spending your Thursday lunch with us. And Jill, again, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you.
Thanks. I've enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for joining.
Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. See you next week.